Boys and girls. It oh, it's still twirling. Okay, I'm fine. Good morning, boys and girls. I hope we remember where we were before Easter. We had ended with part of Joseph's life, and we're in Egypt, and he's in charge of all the storehouses of grain. We're now in our second year of a drought. Now, remember about Joseph. Joseph had a very frustrating life. He was a young boy, and his brothers were very angry with him because he was daddy's favorite. Uh, they were frustrated because they thought that he was getting things that they weren't getting, that daddy loved him more. And daddy actually did. And he even said he did. And he made this coat for him. Remember, the brothers were angry. They dropped him in the dry well. And then when they took him out of the well, what did they do? They sold him into slavery. Well, many years have gone by. He was sold many times. He worked for different people. He ended up in jail. And he stayed there for a little while. But that's just a little recap of where we had been. Like I said, there's 7 years of abundance they had just been through, and he stored up all the grain that he could. Now they are in 7 years of drought. All the people from around Egypt and in Egypt were coming to Joseph, who was in charge of all this grain and in charge of many things in Egypt. He was a Hebrew man who was brought to the status of almost equal to Pharaoh. Well, as the people were coming into Egypt to get food, they were selling everything they had. And those who had land were selling the land to Joseph for Egypt. They were allowed to farm it, they were allowed to plant the grains and grow their crops, but Egypt now owned all their property. Some, even when they didn't have property to sell, were now selling themselves. They sold their lives to be slaves in Egypt for the grain to plant and to be able to feed their families. Well, like I said, we're in the second year, and Joseph's half brothers came to Egypt. Daddy had sent them there to buy food. He had sent them with money. They had all their caravan. They got there, and they were sent before the vizier. Well, that's the person who's kind of in charge next to the Pharaoh. Well, remember who that is? It's their brother Joseph. They didn't recognize him. He was now in his late 30s. It had been over 20 years since they had seen him. Well, guess what? He recognized them. He didn't speak to him in Hebrew. He didn't give them any idea that he was their brother. And he began to accuse them of being spies. That caught them out of left field. They had no idea why. They began to defend themselves. They mentioned a younger brother named Benjamin at home. Well, remember, Joseph hasn't seen his brothers in over 20 years. He demanded they go back and bring Joseph, uh, bring Benjamin back to him to prove that they were there doing what they said they were, that they weren't spies. Well, Benjamin is Joseph's full brother. They had the same mama and they had the same daddy. Joseph placed all the brothers in jail for 3 days. When he let them out, he demanded they go get Benjamin and bring him back to Egypt. As the brothers began to speak, they spoke in Hebrew, thinking he wasn't going to understand. He understood exactly what they were saying. And he left the room because he was suddenly filled with lots of emotion. Well, he sent the brothers home, but he kept Simeon. He tied him up and he kept him like a hostage. Joseph did something else for his brothers as they left. Can anybody remember what that was? He took the money that they had brought to buy grain and he buried it in their supplies. He sent them on the way. Well, they got home. They told their father that they were supposed to bring Benjamin back to Egypt with them. And when they were unpacking everything, they found the money. Well, Jacob became distressed and worried. He'd already lost one son, Joseph. He didn't want to lose another son. But guess what? He sent them back for more grain, and they brought Benjamin with them. Well, when they returned to Egypt, The brothers were received by the steward, or the person who was taking care of Joseph's house, and they were brought into Joseph's house, but they were apprehensive about giving the money back. They weren't sure what they were going to be accused of. Well, they brought him in. They immediately informed the steward. When they immediately informed the steward what had transpired, they felt they were trying to feel out the situation. The steward put them at ease and told them, "Don't worry about it." And then Joseph came in. He gave them, the brothers brought gifts from their father, and Joseph inquired about Benjamin. And again, he was overcome with emotion. The Egyptians at that time did not dine with Hebrews. He had set up a table for them to eat, but they had to eat in a different room. They thought it was Egyptians thought it was loathsome. It was beyond them. It was below them to eat with lowly Hebrews. Well, that night Joseph ordered the steward to bring in all the donkeys and load it up with food and all their money again. The money was brought back double from what they had in the first trip. And then he ordered that a silver cup be hidden in Benjamin's sack. Well, the following morning they headed back to Canaan, and Joseph ordered the steward to follow them and question where this missing silver cup was. And remember, Joseph put it in Benjamin's pack. Benjamin did not steal this cup, but he had him follow him, open the packs, and find where the cup was. This caused the brothers to be very concerned. However, they agreed to be escorted back to Egypt. When Joseph confronted him about the cup, he demanded that the one who possessed the bag become his slave. Okay, so here he is. Seems like he's now being mean to his little brother, who really had nothing to do with what had happened to Joseph. Excuse me. Judah pleaded with Joseph that Benjamin be allowed to return to their father, and he be kept in the place of the slave. Well, he appealed and he begged that Benjamin be released because of the silver. Remember, this is all because of the silver cup that Joseph had placed in Benjamin's sack. He then revealed to the Hebrews that he was in fact their brother, Joseph. He wept so loudly that the Egyptian household heard it outside. The brothers were frozen. They couldn't say a word. He brought them closer and relayed to them the events that had happened and told them not to fear, that what they had meant for evil, God had meant for good. Then he commanded them to go and bring their father and his entire household to live in Egypt. There were 70 people in the household, and he was going to provide a place for all of them to live. There were 5 more years of famine left, so they were going to need to have a place to live where they could plant crops that they could eat, and he wanted to see his daddy again. Afterward, Joseph's family met the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh honored their stay and even proposed that they become people within his household, that they would elect herdsmen and they would oversee the Egyptian livestock. Now, boys and girls, this is the time of the beginning of the Hebrews into Egypt. And we know later on the Hebrews multiplied and they became millions in Egypt. All right. Now daddy, mom, all the family, all the herds, the livestock, they're all now living in Goshen. And the house of Israel acquired many possessions and multiplied exceedingly during that 7 years, even the worst of the 7-year drought. Now, Joseph was blessed by his father. He was given more of an inheritance from his father. Now, he has gone through wonderful things. He's lived a great life now in Egypt after all the bad things that he'd been through. Remember, bad things happen all the time. We get frustrated. Things don't go our way. This morning, my computer decided it was giving up the ghost and it was not going to play with me. Very frustrating this morning. But I'm here on Melvin's computer. Bad things happen to us. God can turn anything bad that happens to us into something good that's going to happen. This virus that's going around, and we're not able to be with our friends in school, but we can be with our moms and our dads and learn at home and to spend more time playing games, playing outside, and doing things. God takes everything bad that happens and he can turn it into good. Well, Joseph's brothers had meant evil for him. They dropped him in that dry well. They took him out and sold him into slavery. He was sold a couple of times and then ended up in jail for many years. Through all of this, there are three things he continued to do. He continued to pray to God. He continued to trust in God. And he continued to love God. God never left him. He left jail and became a man equal to Pharaoh. He was able to help his family because during this drought, his family could have ended up dying where they were. They had no food, no water. He was able to help them, but first he had to forgive his brothers for what they had done to him. Forgiveness is a very important thing, boys and girls. Bad things happen to all of us, but we need to continue to remember those same three things. Continue to pray to God. Continue to trust in God. Continue to love God. He will never leave you. Boys and girls, that's it for today. I miss you. Thursdays at 7 o'clock, we get on Zoom and I will send the links to your parents again. Every Thursday at 7 o'clock, as long as we're not in church here, we're going to do something fun. We had a scavenger hunt last week and we could do it again this week. We may change it up a little bit every once in a while, but just think about that goodie box at church. We have a different type of goodie box going on with this. So join us Thursdays at 7 o'clock. Your parents will have the link. I love you all and I miss you. Good night. Goodbye.